I think maybe one other thing is, especially if you're transitioning from into a completely different role, right? If you're making the move from teacher into administrator, I think one of the things is really just investing in trying to develop those skills. And part of that is, going back to spending time with people who have already been in the role, right? So that you can learn from them vicariously. But the other part of that is just consuming as much as you can in trying to develop those skills. But I think the piece that gets left out of that a lot too is actually putting some things into practice. I talk a lot with aspiring administrators, and they ask a lot of questions and they're learning a lot of things. But when they get into the role, they're still not prepared for it because they haven't actually executed on any of the things that they're going to have to do once they actually get into the role. That was actually part of my doctoral study, right? I interviewed new assistant principals, and one of the questions that I got to ask everyone was, "What were you not prepared for?" And I got a lot of different answers, but overwhelmingly, the vast majority of them said over and over again they just weren't ready for the amount of work that comes across their desk in a day. They weren't prepared to manage their time. They weren't prepared for all of the different types of tasks that they were going to be asked to do, and that there's so much, right? There's legalities, there's student discipline, which one of the things with really good teachers is a lot of times they don't have to deal with conflict because they innately figure out ways to make things work, right? So the first time they get into an actual conflict is when they're sitting in a leadership role and they're supposed to have the answer. So finding ways to spend time with people who are going through that work, finding ways to try new things to help solve problems on your campus, doing things that are actually going to develop those skills, and not just, you and I talked about when I decided it was time for me to move into an administrative role, I started reading and listening to everything that I possibly could, including this podcast and your first book. And they were fantastic in terms of giving me knowledge that I needed to get into the role. But I still remember when I walked into the role the first time, I had no idea what I was actually supposed to do. I just had kind of a macro level view of what it looked like. So really focus on developing those skills and finding out what the work actually looks like in a new role, I think is a big one.